The Fearless Podcast, in a time of deceit, telling the truth, is a revolutionary act. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Fearless Podcast. We are at episode 74, and we have a lot of different things going on here. The homestead, we have new home construction. We have lots of things that you'll be finding out about soon. I wanted to let you know the new website should go live this week. We do have 2 steers still for sale, and also Food Forest in a Box should be launching here mid-October. So for all y'all looking out for that, keep an eye out. But yeah, the new website should be up with a new coffee line. We are introducing pods for all of you Keurig people that like the convenience of that. And today I have a great friend, and this has been a long anticipated podcast. Me and Steve both are busy people, and we've been trying to coordinate our schedules, but I wanted to introduce y'all to Steve from Grumpy's Garden Club. Hey, Steve, how you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, I am doing fantastic. It's another beautiful East Texas morning and slightly cooler, which is always it's just
Always
a
welcome.
fabulous time of year. Yeah.
Love it.
So, Steve, me and you, we met maybe a couple, 2, 3, 4 years ago now.
It was at least 3. It might have been 4. It was at least 3
Yeah.
though.
Yeah, and I was driving down the road and I saw this sign with this smiling sun, and it said Grumpy's Garden Club.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "What in the world is Grumpy's Garden Club?" And so we pulled in and we got to experience all that is Grumpy's Garden Club. And that's what I was hoping we could talk about here is your vision of the club, and then what it's kind of transformed into, and just the community building components of it. And so maybe you could kind of give us maybe the origin story of Grumpy's Garden Club, and
Sure.
and we could kind of discuss that. That'd be good.
Okay. I'll give you the quick and dirty version, right? Because it can't be a garden club without being a little dirty.
Sure.
We basically when COVID hit and a lot of the churches decided that they were no longer going to meet on Sundays. and unfortunately that was a large number of them. The one we were attending at the time also decided that they were going to go remote, and they were going to try to, recreate the experience of corporate worship or whatever through video, video streaming. And as we discussed pre-show a little bit, my internet connection out here is kind of rough, and it always has been. And so the video streaming experience of church was suboptimal. Not only could you not sing a song because the rhythm would get interrupted, but you also felt very much like you were watching a really bad television show. And so, since that was for the majority of my family, my wife and my kids included, was their biggest social event of the week, we kind of found ourselves in a deficit of human interaction. I love being with my family. I think we get along pretty well, but 7 uninterrupted days of the same faces and the same issues, every now and then you need an injection of additional thoughts, additional, just relationship, right? And so, with the lockdowns being what they were, everybody in the community, whether they went to church or not, was feeling that. And we had a lot of shaming from a certain percentage of the population that thought we really should adhere to the lockdowns and everyone should mask up and not go out in public at all. And then we had what I would consider the majority of folks that felt like, but we need people. We want to be with people. And so I had been dabbling with gardening pretty much, I don't know, most of my adult life. Okay. And I'm honestly not very good at it, which is where the name came from. But that particular season, I don't know if it was an epiphany or if it was divine inspiration, but for whatever reason, I felt like a good way to get people together would be to garden with them or to talk about gardening, to swap seeds and swap plants and things like that. And for whatever reason, and I don't really understand all of the details myself, that spring of 2020 when the lockdowns hit, and I think it was March, um, I already had plants going, and we decided to launch what we called Grumpy's Garden Club. Or I say we, I decided to launch Grumpy's Garden Club, and I drug my family with me, kicking and screaming. And basically, the idea was I would have all these plants that I had already propagated or started from seed. I would supplement with a few other things that I got wholesale because I did go ahead and get a nursery license. And then I would set them up on tables on our property where we have a little muscadine vineyard, and invite other vendors and people from the community and just announce it on Facebook and say, hey, y'all come out this Saturday, take a look at what we have, and take a look at what these vendors are offering, and just hang out with us between 9 and 2 or 9 and 4, I think it was that first year. And um, it honestly, it was blessed. A lot of people came. A lot of people came and didn't even buy anything or didn't even really want to look at stuff. They just wanted to hang out with other people and talk because they hadn't been able to do it for a while. And it just seemed so weird. Everything seemed so weird at the time. Um, I think we did that 3 or 4 Saturdays that first spring. And then I kind of took the summer off, honestly, because it was too hot to do much. But the idea kept growing in my mind of how we could turn this into something more than just a sort of a way to let off steam, pent up energy, and a social fix. That fall, we had mums and we did some other things that brought people together. And I made up my mind pretty early that this was not going to be a money making venture. This was going to be I'm going to appeal to folks using plants because that's kind of a universal thing. But at the same time, the idea is it's more like a wholesale club. I'm going to give it to you for less than retail because that way you're getting good plants and you're getting them at a good price. And I've eroded all the reasons that you might not show up. The next year, we had more vendors, and we had we had food trucks, and we had bands like the Purple Holes came, and we had a couple other folks come in, bluegrass bands and other things. We even had a lady that played the dulcimer one day. She just sat out underneath a tree and played the dulcimer for a couple hours, and that was fun. And the group started to coalesce around the idea of we're local East Texas folks. We all have our own interests. Nobody gardens really for the same reason. Some folks like landscaping. Some folks like vegetables. Some folks just like, to cut the grass. But everybody at some level loves being outside, right? And that gave us an opportunity to get together. And for whatever reason, it grew and got good. But there was something in my mind kind of nagging. Uh, it wasn't a successful business. In fact, it has done nothing but cost me money, right? So um, that the next year, I'd say 2022 and then 2023, these years basically progressed a little in some ways, but then we had our vendor attention and involvement back off quite a bit. And I realized that it wasn't really beneficial to them if there wasn't a high volume of traffic. And we weren't really interested in a high volume of traffic as much as we were interested in making bonds and relationships with people and getting to know who lives where and what they're up to and what they're doing. Um, and it was never overtly spiritual either. That was the idea was just to meet people where they are and not be dogmatic, not try to shove anything down anyone's throat, but just to offer goodness, wholesomeness, and that's all. Um, and and like I said, a group did coalesce. I think even now we've got like 186 members that are affiliated with the website, and and just this past summer, I've basically announced that we're turning over a new leaf. I'm letting the nursery license go. In fact, that's already over. That's done. So I am no longer a business. I will no longer be collecting sales tax. From now on, what I'm doing is I'm growing plants and I'm making them available donation only. And that way, there is absolutely no monetary incentive or complication or entanglement. It is 100%. These are the plants that I've grown that I don't need. Would you like them? And if they have a value to you, feel free to contribute so I can keep doing more, you know? Um, but I want to cultivate more of a regular meeting time so we can be involved in each other's daily lives and get to know each other and become actual friends. That's kind of what I'm hoping 2025 will bring.
Wow, that sounds awesome. So, what's always interesting is when you have an idea, and then I always tell my boys, no plan survives first contact, right? That's a military term.
Right.
And so you get these brilliant ideas. And so you had this idea to create community, for lack of a better term, or to get to know your community. And that's what's so critical, even COVID, no COVID, with all this just VR and social media. There is a great um, attempt being made to cloister all of us within our own homes, in a sense, and we saw that fully manifest in 2020. But to try to like just make us all feel alone and to divide us and chop us up, and then you came up with a great idea. Hey, we can all either love the outdoors, or we love plants, or we love growing, or like you were saying, or even if it's just cutting your grass, we have these common bonds where we can circle around these common bonds to help create relationships, create community. And it's really neat to see it grow and kind of morph and shift into something new, maybe bigger, maybe better. But we're basically attempting to do the same thing with our um, meetups, and we've been able to kind of cross pollinate a little bit doing that. And we would
Not as
like to
much as
do
I
it
would like.
more.
Not as
Yeah,
much as I would
yeah,
like.
yeah. Us neither. I mean, we're the challenge is the other part of the challenge is we are all very busy, whether we're busy with our family lives, certainly our work lives, because and especially as things become more and more expensive, it makes the almost necessity to become busier to produce more so that you can provide for your family. And but at the same time, when we see that need for human interaction, I mean, even in a very base general sense of, we have family, we have children, eventually these children grow up, eventually these children are going to have to marry somebody. And since we're not like the 13 families of the bloodlines, we're not going to intermarry, we're going to want to marry other genetics and all kinds of cool stuff like that. So it's really important to kind of go outside and say hi to people and talk to them, and
Right.
get to know them, and find out where we do agree, and where we do appreciate, not only just where we agree, but even where we appreciate each other's differences and other people's point of views and other people's perspectives. And that's what made this whole entire thing like a garden club um so neat to me, because like, wow, what a kind of like an abstract idea. There's plants here, so you're welcome to come and look at plants or whatever. And
Right.
but
I
it's
mean, that's
neat to
pretty
see
tame.
how
That's pretty tame. I mean,
yeah, yeah, it
there's no
doesn't get any
threat.
more.
They're just tomato plants.
They're nightshades. No. but, but yeah, it's been really neat to watch it grow, and it's very cool to come, and you get to see some of the same people again and just create these relationships. And 9 times out of 10, it's so interesting to me, because you start talking to somebody and like, oh, I live right over there. Oh, I've always wondered who lives over there,
Right.
because we got our automobiles now, we have our air conditioning, and we're in a hurry, and we're running to run our errands or whatever, and we just don't get the time to slow down, stop, talk, have intellectual discussions about what's right or what's wrong with the world, or what's working for us and what's not working. And that's the beauty of gardening, is there's all these bizarre nuanced things in gardening where something works for somebody and something doesn't work for somebody else. And so you can kind of put your heads together and say, hey, this worked for me, this didn't work for me. And it really is just creating dialogue and creating relationships. And then what you've done is you've created an absolutely magnificently beautiful area to meet together. And I think the other thing that makes your club so much more impactful is I think we have a sincere need to get back in touch with reality, and everything is so synthesized and synthetic and concrete and everything. And when you start talking about plants and food and all these different things, it's a return to a more basic, simplified life, where uh, we can relate to it or we want to relate to it. Um, that helps create more dialogue and more discussion. And it's really neat to get out and meet more people in your community, understand the challenges that they have, and just be able to be a blessing to people.
Hmm. I know that you and I have discussed this before. I think it bears repeating here. One of the things that I've discovered about myself that I didn't know prior to this venture was that I'm not a very competitive person. Competition has never really appealed to me. I'm not really a sports guy. My wife loves it because I never watch football. I'm just not interested in that stuff. I would much rather be producing something, and that is just a personality trait. Okay, I don't even take credit for it. It's just something I'm compelled to do. But because I'm compelled to do that, and I'm not competitive, one of the things I realized is gardening is like a universal language. Um, I'm not competing with what you're growing. And so, just like you mentioned a second ago, if I'm having trouble with my garlic and you're having success with your garlic, there's no competition there. I can ask you, hey, what are you doing that makes your garlic so beautiful and so tasty? And you can say, well, this is how we grow it on our place. Have you tested your soil? When are you putting it in the ground? What are you fertilizing it with? And then it's like our relationship is made stronger because the problem solving is sort of a joint effort. And I know we don't live that far apart, but I promise you in East Texas, our soils probably have some differences. And so what I can grow, you may not be able to grow. Or like on our property, I've got moles and gophers and voles so bad that I can't put anything in the ground. And not everybody in the club has that problem. So they ask me, so what do you do when you've got heavy clay soil? And I'm like, it's not a problem for me because I can't put anything in the ground anyway. I have to grow everything in raised beds or in pots. So, if you have any questions about raised beds or pots, I'm kind of an expert. And that's one of the things that's just been a lot of fun is it's a very wholesome relationship building, problem solving. We're in a community kind of thing that I just honestly didn't expect for gardening to be such a silver bullet in that regard, because it really does erode a lot of the things that divide us. It doesn't matter what your race is when it comes to gardening. It doesn't matter what language you speak when it comes to gardening. It doesn't honestly even matter where you live. Gardening is always local. So if you're 30 minutes away from me, your gardening is going to be whatever your ground is and your sun is and your water is. Same thing for me. But there are some similarities in the plants. And I can say if we're growing the exact same thing and we're 30 minutes away, you're probably going to do something different than I do because of the microclimate or whatever. And we can learn from each other. There's always things to learn. Gardening is probably the most experimental endeavor, mostly because the environment loves to throw things at you that you're like, oh, I didn't
Mhm.
expect camphor shot beetles. I didn't expect fungus. I didn't expect drought or whatever. And because we are born to be stewards, and managers. We just manage it, human. That's what we do. But the competition element is important to mention, because some people feel like they have to lie, cheat, steal, finagle, compete, because they have a particular mentality. What this Grumpy's Garden Club thing has really helped cultivate inside of me is a different mentality. And that mentality is abundance versus scarcity. If I believe that the earth does not have enough resources to support all the people on it, then I will become innately competitive for those resources. However,
Yeah.
if I am convinced, as I am, that this earth has plenty of resources for everybody, and any disparity is an allocation management problem and not a lack of resources problem, that's an abundance mindset where I'm like, I don't have to compete with you. I can grow tomatoes and you can grow tomatoes, and it doesn't hurt either one of us to have more tomatoes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what's even larger than that, thinking of the garlic analogy, like let's say someone is very good at raising garlic and maybe you're not, and maybe your soil isn't even capable or whatever it might be due to pests. Now you have a garlic resource, and then
Yes.
it can become an even great. I mean, how towns developed, right? And how literal communities developed was over an exchange of resources. And I think it's really important to understand. And one thing that 2020 taught us with these ephemeral supply chains and this on time inventory and all this stuff is like 98% of our industrialized world can, relatively speaking, evaporate in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks.
Yes.
Insert toilet paper joke here.
Yes.
But when
There is no security found in our system.
yeah, yeah, by design.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And the other thing, when you see this effort by the social engineers and they, them, those, and the thought leaders and Rand Corporation and fill in the blank, whoever else, their end game goal is stack them, pack them, track them, concrete jungle, 15-minute cities or whatever. And I've always said this. We just got back from a trip and we met some awesome friends and another family. And I think the moniker for life, as far as what I should do and how do we um, find balance in life and different things, is I always say this: observe the masses and do the opposite.
Mm.
And Grumpy's Garden Club is literally the opposite of everything that mainstream, everything that the financial and investment strategists, and it's the opposite of that. And it's like, well, instead of like divide, separate, isolate, ostracize, how about we come together? How about we share? How about we do? And it's a recreation of community where folks are getting to meet their neighbor again. They're getting to slow down, sit down, talk, um, around food. Food is such a powerful thing. We all need food to exist,
Yeah.
and it makes this common bond that is just such a necessity. And I really appreciate your approach to abundance, because what has been deconstructing society are these Malthusians, and the peak oil guys and all of these Malthusian concepts, overpopulation. I mean, nobody can live in East Texas and drive for an hour. And we just drove to Iowa, and my goodness, there are so few people on this planet. Like,
Oh,
um, it
the
it is
overpopulation argument is so ridiculous to me. It's almost as stupid as climate science alarmism, um, which also is ridiculous. But overpopulation is something you can mathematically, in 5 minutes, you can demonstrate that whole argument is smoke.
Yeah.
It's smoke. There's plenty of room.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to get together because so many people, unfortunately, they choose to have these black mirrors in their house and they turn them on as background noise and it's programming them, what to think and how to think and to fear and all these different things. And if people would unplug from that and just talk to other human beings and observe so much of growing and gardening is just stopping and observing,
Oh, yeah.
observing your climate, observe what's going on around you, observe the way the water flows, observe where the water is, observe where the water isn't, and then interact and then pick your spot to plant or whatever. And you can achieve so much more by stopping, observing, slowing down, talking to other people that have wisdom, that have been doing it longer, or have maybe been, are more accustomed to this climate and zone.
Or have
Um,
made more mistakes. Like I said to
yeah.
people, I've killed. The story between David and Saul, right? When David kills Goliath, the people say Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. I have killed more plants than most people have seen in their life. So yes, I share that experience with you. You do not have to kill these plants. I can show you how not to.
I've slain many plants myself. Um, they will
Not
they
hard to
will be
do
so
here.
vibrant. Yeah, they'll be so vibrant and exuberant, for years, and then they will just die, like, unexplainably,
Yeah.
and it's neat to, my background is I grew up inside, I never grew anything my whole entire life. My grandparents and my dad had a small garden, and they did all of that, um, basically just they picked it up, it was part of life, it was a lifestyle, and they did it. And my generation, in a very real way, didn't. My generation was more of like the beginning of the internet and this mass pervasion of video games and all of this synthetic stuff and synthetic lifestyle. And university, go to a Prussian, get Prussian educated so that you can get like narrowed down into this tiny little wedge of a niche so you can compete, because you are going to be an expert in uh, East East Asia basket weaving or whatever. And you've drilled down so tight that you're, relatively speaking, unless you're weaving Asian baskets, you're worthless to society. You know what I mean? And
Tiny
and I
boxes.
think we,
They
yeah,
fit us in
yeah, I
tiny
think,
boxes. Yep.
yeah, yeah. And that's what's so neat about creating this community, developing community, and kind of like, broadening our horizons. And it's not, to be, um, I think we do need the return of the polymath, or the individual that has multiple skill sets, not to mean that you can't be a true expert in one area, but to develop many skills that will synergistically work together and will provide for your community. I raise my boys, um, and it's not that we're anti college, even though we are very anti college. I don't want anybody to misunderstand that I am very anti college, because if you want to know how we got here, we were all programmed by communists to,
It's
reach
true.
this end game that we're at. So in a very real way, yeah, it was, the communists have taken over the education system, certainly the government school. And, so that's kind of how we got here. So yeah, I am very I'm not anti education. I'm not anti,
Oh,
you should never stop learning.
correct. Yeah, no, I'm 100% in agreement with you there. 100%. The
So,
education element is always necessary because we are not animals, we are humans, and we don't know everything. And honestly, it is a closed mind that cannot learn. And so, as life keeps throwing new challenges at us, we need to constantly be open to learning new things. And education is important, especially to understand history. But the problem with that is, like you said, the communists do control our education system in the United States and other countries. And so they have woven a narrative that is not always true. And if you absorb that and you live your life based on that and you make your decisions factoring that in, you are in error many times and don't even realize it. In fact, you will probably defend your error thinking that you are defending truth. But if I won't peel off on a rabbit trail there, but truth matters more to me than anything else in this life. And so, yes, we need to educate ourselves as to what is true. No, we do not need to be sending our kids to indoctrination camps.
Yeah, and I mean that's how do you get to this overpopulation and the green agenda and all these different things? There's a finite scarcity of resources, and in our attempt, the social planners, in our attempt to save you from this scarcity of resources, will all become trillionaires. That's kind of convenient, you know. That's their end game. Is somehow it always involves them making trillions of dollars, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Which shows you that it's just a mechanism for wealth redistribution. And
Yeah.
the wealth always gets redistributed to the top of the pyramid and not the bottom, which is when you are creating abundance and you're sharing, it's the opposite. It's observing the masses and it's doing the opposite, and it's harvesting and reaping the rewards of that, which is why it's so we have our local meetup, and this is a little bit probably to our maybe our fault or whatever, but new people come out and they'll be like, okay, so what's the schedule like? So who's going to be speaking and on what topics and all that stuff, and I'm like, well, it's a meetup. Right now there's no real structure to it. We're just all kind of hanging out, talking, getting to know each other. And not to say that that would be a bad thing and we couldn't implement those kind of things, but I think if you schedule it too much and it's on this rigid time structure, it almost defeats the purpose of the point is to get together, to get to know each other, to find out where each other live, so that we can maybe participate that way. Um, and I think a schedule or structure kind of defeats the purpose.
Well, it definitely limits the synergy. It compartmentalizes your spontaneity and the serendipity that can come from just realizing, hey, you do that or you do this, or hey, I have a similar story. Let me tell you about it. That kind of stuff can't happen if everything is regimented, right? Um, and I do understand though. As a manager, I understand having a schedule. I understand having a budget. I understand marshaling forces toward a common goal. And so there is, obviously it's kind of a necessary evil at some level. You do schedule the meetup, but the meetups are generally unscheduled time so that people can allow that space for interaction and spontaneity and people to just be people because we don't always do that on a schedule. We don't.
Yeah, and we're real organic in the sense of if somebody wanted to do that, pick up and tote the ball and say, "Hey, we could bring this speaker in," and I'm like, "Yeah, go for it. Let's do it." You know what I mean? Like, so at just like you're learning these things morph and change. Our meetup will probably morph and change, I'm sure. So moving forward, kind of like, where do you see what's your vision for Grumpy's Garden Club moving into 2025?
That's a great question, and something I think about almost daily, because I don't feel like, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't know that we have a whole lot of time um, for the status quo to remain. I think, and I'm not just talking about an election year, but I also feel like everything feels strained. Everything feels thin and threadbare. Um, the social networks, I mean, I don't know since the Civil War if America as a culture has ever been more divided. ideologically than it is right now. I try not to spend a lot of time on social networks because I understand that they are engineering us.
Yeah.
But it is a way that I've found in the past to access other people where they are in the moment and to inject truth. And almost universally, I get two responses, and they are as polar opposite as they could be. Um, and some of them, you say something that you know is true, philosophically true, um, ontologically true, and half of the population will want to burn you down for it because the truth might be the most hated thing in the universe. Um, and so I don't know. In 2025 for the Garden Club, I see a couple things happening. One, I see more regular meetings, local meetings. We now have a venue on our property. I wouldn't say we rescued it, but there was that century-old chapel in East Mountain. The property owner wanted it moved, and we've relocated it now to our place, and we use it as a gathering space, and it's really good for that, honestly. And we I would like to have more events where we just get together and talk about different topics that are important to people, and let them weigh in on what they would like to hear, and maybe also engage experts in those topics so that someone in the room can actually say, I have 25 years experience in this, or I'm certified at this, and I can say the following and help you in this way. That's something I would like to see our club do more of. But I'll be honest with you, my thoughts going into 2025 are more, are we prepared to live for 3 to 6 months without a functioning infrastructure? I don't think we are, generally. And I know that that is something that's been important to you, and I've admired that about you and the way you and your wife raise your kids. Um, Having it's not just an entrepreneurship mindset, it's sort of a Swiss Army knife mindset. It's like, whatever the situation requires, I am capable of meeting it. um, I will manage this, is kind of the way I see you handling those things. And that's what I would like to try to cultivate in people that are not thinking that way right now. Um, you know, I have a strong and ardent faith that there is a creator God and that he does have a purpose for the universe. But I also recognize, based on what is written in the Bible, that there are forces that are countering him, and they are trying to harm us. Those forces have great influence, or the Hebrew word would be kavod, great influence over the the leaders and the movements of human beings on earth. And that's not, I'm not trying to be a weird conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying, look around. These movements and their philosophies transcend a human lifetime. This is not just a political movement. This is thousands of years of human history. And if you look at it and you think, man, this sure looks like a conspiracy, it is a conspiracy. And no, it wasn't any one human. And no, it's not that political group, which is counter to this political group. For whatever reason, they align on this one thing that happens to harm people. Um, Without sounding too crazy, I just want to say that in 2025, I would like for my efforts to be focused on helping people become more resilient physically in their ability to produce their own food, in their ability to read the environment and understand what it needs. If something is happening to the rain, we can counter it by doing this. If something is happening to the soil, we can counter it by doing this. To just be aware of what is actually happening, and then be aware and capable of addressing those things with management and administrative tactics, but then also to continue to build a network of people that are like-minded, that understand that what's going on in the world is not just political. What's going on in the world is not just environmental, but it is also spiritual. And that
Yeah.
this is something um, that we have there. God can give us the power to counter it. And I
Yep.
do feel like there are going to be people that will come and ask me questions about, how do we do this? I mean, this is what's going on in my life, and how do I manage it? And it has nothing to do with potatoes or hot peppers. It's just life stuff. but because I've cultivated a relationship with them, and because they recognize me as one of the people in their life that will always tell them the truth, then I could also be a resource for things that are, I think, much more profound. And that's what I would
What's
like to do.
and what's fascinating to me, you bring up this topic of principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in high places and all these different things. I've been reading the Bible a couple 20 some years now, and I've read it through many, many times. And um, what's really fascinating is how so many Gnostic and atheistic people can be watching the current um, things unfold as they are, and they recognize evil. They can recognize evil, and they even recognize this good versus evil, but they keep it in such a generic way where they don't have to recognize God.
Right.
And they ignore the fact that Satan is the prince and the power of the air. But there's a tremendous opportunity with all of that. We can help connect the dots for people, and we can read. I'm reading the Psalms a lot, and uh, it's so important because all that I see in the Psalms is the Lord will fight for us. The Lord will provide. And for all of these that have abused the fatherless and the widow and the poor, their day is coming,
Yes.
and God will not be mocked, and He's coming to settle accounts. And so the first point of that is I must be ready to stand before God to give an account, and God's gonna sort all this out. God's gonna sort out the George Soroses and the Bill Gates and all these other guys, the district of criminals and all of them. He's gonna sort that all out. But first and foremost, I have to be ready to stand before God to give an account for what I've done. And I mean, talk about personal responsibility. Talk about accountability and being accountable is, as a father, it's one thing if you're this single person and your life revolves around you and you're comfortable and you have your house and everything. But as a father, I put an inordinate amount of pressure on myself. I have lots of mouths to feed. I have people to care for. I have to be, as much as we want to unplug, and rightly so, from the news cycle and the social engineering that is going on your Twitter feed. I'm so fascinated the way they create my Twitter feed to make me think that everyone is running around either knocking each other out or shooting people or just like gross acts of violence, you
Right.
know. And then what you do is you drive to Iowa. You're like, no, no, none of that stuff's happening at all. Like, and I'd never been to Iowa, right? And I have a very being born and raised in the North, and being an understander of history, and understanding the war of northern aggression, and I have a very low opinion of the North. And that doesn't mean that obviously anybody or everybody or even one person up there is less or anything, or that I look at them poorly. I just have a very low opinion of the North as a generic blanket statement. And we went up there, and I'm like, everybody's wearing cowboy boots. I'm like, if it wasn't so cool right now, I would think I was in Texas. You know what I mean? And that's a very real thing. And what it and as much as we kind of don't have time for it to travel and different things, I think the more you travel and you talk to other people from other places, you're like, we very much are much more alike than we are different. And
Yeah.
and I'm not just saying this in a pragmatic way because, as a Christian who believes that you should go into all the world and preach the gospel, that's a mandate. Um, Obviously, uh, you will be required to interact with people and talk to people that
Yeah.
clearly don't believe what you believe and don't agree with you, which what makes these type of environments that you're trying to foster and create so much more important. Because if look, if you can get together with people and you only want to talk about an eggplant or whatever, yeah, there'll be time to talk about the eggplant and all these things. But I would hope that we're uh, big enough in our perspective and in light of eternity that we would probably talk about a lot of different things and incredibly controversial things. We all know the two things you don't talk about is politics and religion,
Right.
but in a very real way, um, these are kind of like the most important things that we do have to talk about and that we do have to develop our own personal fundamental paradigm or however you want to think about it. Like, we have to talk about these things. We have to discuss it. We can't there's such an attack on our food system and our food supply, and they want to put RFID chips in the ears of our cows and all these other different things. Like, we have to think about these things. We have to talk about it. We have to talk about strategies. We have to talk about how are like the Rogue Food Conference that's coming up that John Moody and Joel Salton are putting on in Dallas. We have to meet together as a community. We have to talk about arbitrage and what we're going to do about these things. We just can't be like blind to it and
Oh yeah.
ignorant. I think that's what you're talking about for 2025 is waking people up that are very much they're very settled in their ways. They think that everything is just going to continue. I
Hmm.
think I think there's a passage in the Bible about that, when their fathers fell asleep, and everything's just going to remain the same. We clearly see that that is not going to happen and that things are in massive change. They're changing rapidly. There's things that we have to think about that we wouldn't even consider 5 years ago that
True.
they weren't even a thing. And now they're like this massive issue. And that's why it's really important to get to know your neighbor, to sit down, to talk these things out. And the other point to that is that doesn't, none of these deeper, more important things in life, that rarely ever happens like the first time you meet somebody. That type of deep discussion, you have to get to know the person, and you have to become comfortable with them in some way to even want to engage and interact with that discussion. And that's where these kind of systematic get-togethers where you build relationships and people grow to trust you and appreciate you. It does open doors for the larger discussions that do have to happen if we want society to continue.
True, absolutely. And you kind of you gave more detail than I did earlier, but I just saw just this past week that in the UK they are trying to pass a law that requires anyone that owns a single chicken must register it with the government. And so a lot of people, I mean, I would say most of the people that I know and work with and live in community with, they don't own chickens. I don't know, we do. We own lots of chickens, but they don't. And so how in the world would that possibly bother them? But I will tell you that when chicken eggs grew in expense, I should say their cost went up dramatically among all the staples that you would get at a grocery store. It seems like eggs and milk went up the most percentage wise. People started asking us, "Hey, can I get eggs from you?" And I'm like, "Only because I have chickens.
Yep.
And if you had chickens, you wouldn't even be asking me." But if we have statists like the UK leadership wanting to require uh, that people, citizens, register their chickens so that for what reason? Why would they want that? They want control. They want to know who has them. They say that it's because of bird flu or some kind of health issue, and that's always the shoehorn to get into your business and to micromanage your life. But the fact of the matter is, depopulation is in the top 10 of the motivating factors behind most of the climate policy, because they recognize, or they think they recognize, that the number of people on this planet is part of the problem. It's part of the reason why we've got hunger over here and famine over here and war over there. It's scapegoated. It's not true, but nobody does their own research, and so many of us are just living 9 to 5 for the weekends, and watching football or whatever it is we do for entertainment. We're not paying attention, and so, like you said, one of the things that we could be helping each other out as a community is staying tuned to what the governments are doing, what they are trying to regulate, what they are trying to manage for us, and communicating that to one another. Because, quite frankly, if they outlaw local farms, there is only one reason why they would do that. And that's
Yeah.
because they want complete control over the food supply. And when they have complete control of the food supply, we are less than serfs. We literally become dependents on the government. And that is not a way to live. That is not freedom. It's certainly not the democracy that everyone is fighting for these days, right?
Right.
So what I would love to see, just like you said, and I want to cultivate this more and more, is I want an inversion of the the top-down centralized status kind of control mindset of individuals. Instead, I would love to unlock the individual creativity. I would love to break down the hurdles that keep us from um, our creativity and our natural production. Everybody's got ideas. Everybody's got things that they would like to see happen. Everybody has their idea of what the good life is, and that's unique to each individual. And one of the most fascinating things I've discovered in the last 4 years of Grumpy's Garden Club is somebody else's idea could be revolutionary to me. Something I'd never even thought about before. Something that is just, I'm so excited. How can I help you get there? That kind of thing. And that will build community really fast. But another thing that builds community really fast is going through hardship together.
Yeah.
You can really bond over, this is not a good situation. What are we going to do to manage it? I'm in pain, you're in pain, or I'm desperate, you're desperate. What do we do? And in those situations, people, I would say, because of our education system and because of our culture, we have not been trained to think uh, logically or to problem solve. We have only been trained to memorize facts and recite them on cue. The education system, especially since Carter, since he created the Department of Education, does one thing well, and that's create yes men. It
Mhm.
doesn't create um, the Renaissance men that we really need to be. So no, I don't have to be an expert in everything, but being well versed in history and well versed in science and math and well versed. I mean, like you were saying earlier, I don't have to. I'm not anti-expert, but at the same time, I can't just specialize. We're not insects. We're humans. Okay, we need to know how to do a little bit of everything. And when we know how to do a little bit of everything, and we live in community with other humans that know how to do a little bit of everything, it's a neural network that's hard to defeat. And honestly, the statists know that. And so they will do what they can to divide us. They will do what they can to polarize us, and they will do what they can to keep us dependent on them. And honestly, I'm anti that. I'm anti that to my core.
Amen. And the other thing that I think is very important to point out is, as we see these challenging things, is I noticed that and mentioned that at the beginning of COVID, is that with the collapse of the supply chain, more people will appreciate the supply chain. They'll, oh, hey, Steve has eggs. I wonder if Steve has enough eggs where he would sell me eggs. You know what I mean? And what that does is, whether you sell it to them for the greenbacks, the fiat currency, or whether you exchange some type of mutual benefit or barter or whatever, that's actually, this is what's kind of fascinating to observe the social planners, and people always say, well, how come they haven't already done whatever? Well, it's because of when you try to pull something off like COVID, right? And lock everything down and lock everybody down and knock all the food off the shelves at Walmart. Well, it does wake people up to the fact of like, oh, maybe there won't always be food at Walmart, right?
That's right.
And whether those people like are long-term thinkers and proactive enough to say, well, maybe I will get some chickens and maybe I will buy a cow. At a minimum, they're going to say, I got to find eggs. Steve has eggs. You know what I mean? And that in turn, wow, we don't need Walmart. We need each other. You
Yeah.
know, like I don't need, if I want eggs, I don't need Walmart. I need Steve, and that's what helps uh foster community, right? And is actually doing the inversion. It's actually doing the opposite of what the social planners want us to do. And in my opinion, if we can just, if people would just unplug long enough to get dehypnotized from the programming, one, they would have an inordinate amount of extra time.
Yeah.
That's what really gets lost on a industrialized modern society is we've created all of these mechanisms and industrialization to free up our time, and then we take all of that free time and we waste it with entertainment and sports ball and movies and all these other things, when in reality what should be happening is we should be becoming more increasingly more productive. Like we should be so much more abundant and so much more productive. I make this uh, when people talk about the off grid thing and like doing everything like the Amish with horse drawn whatever. There's an enormous amount of value in all that. I'm not belittling that, but I have a tractor, right? And I can produce in horsepower and work 1,000-fold what horses could do, right?
Yeah.
So if I have that force multiplier, like what am I doing? I should be, man, I should be out producing these people, right? I mean, and it's not that it's a competition, but it's a personal unction and pressure that I'm putting on myself, right? To like, hey, we to whom much is given, much shall be required. And we've been given all of this. We've been getting given a Bible, right? And we've
Yeah.
been given all of these advancements and all of the and what's really interesting too is we finally in this fourth turning we're watching all that. This is going to start going away, dollar gas and gasoline engines and all of these things as they're replacing these dairy farms with solar farms. Two of the scariest things I saw driving to Iowa is one is right here in Texas. It's probably near Paris, and it was thousands of acres, and all of the Unistrut, the solar panels are sitting out there in cardboard boxes, and it's just thousands of acres of this beautiful fertile. It probably was a cotton field or something. It's probably what it was, but it's just thousands of solar panels going in,
Mm.
and I'm hearing it more and more. And instead of going to West Texas where they could buy an acre where it doesn't rain, it's not cloudy, and they could buy an acre for $300, they got to come here in Northeast Texas and buy the most expensive, most fertile farmland to put solar panels on it, just in an attempt and an effort to waste their printed money that they continue to print, and they can and absorb the infrastructure so that we can't feed ourselves.
That's
You
right.
know,
That's right.
it's just making all of these topics more important to pay attention to, more important to you definitely shouldn't wait till everything is gone and Walmart is your sole single payer system where you are getting your universal basic income on your government issued debit card to buy your Wonder Bread or whatever. You shouldn't wait till you get there. You should start now and think about this, and at a minimum, just start considering it. If you're really got lots of energy, maybe start doing something about it. And that's why these conversations are so important. And it sounds like they're having really awesome conversations over at Grumpy's Garden Club. Steve, where I'll put the links down below, but where can people get more information on Grumpy's Garden Club?
I used to use Facebook a lot, but I'm gonna just warn everyone now. The Facebook page does me no good, in the sense that yes, people are on Facebook and yes, they can see the stuff I do, but I will not be posting there. I don't maintain it. I don't appreciate anything Mark Zuckerberg has done for any of us. So
Oh, he's a libertarian now, dude. Don't worry about. Oh, he's all
sure
better.
he is. Sure he
Yeah,
is.
yeah, he's all better now.
Grumpysgardenclub.com, all spelled out. That is going to be the single source of current and uh, accurate information for what I've got going on. I post my events there. Sometimes I even post your events up there. But the idea is that's where I would like folks to get accustomed to checking in to find out what's going on. And if you want to be a member, it's free. There's zero obligation to you. And I only send emails to update you on what's going on. There is no advertising. Again, I am effectively a nonprofit, even though I'm not legally a nonprofit. The point is not to make money, it's to make friends. And the reason why I'm making friends isn't just because I'm a narcissist and want a bunch of people follow me around. It's because we benefit from knowing each other and from talking and learning and sharing and quite honestly, uh, growing together. And that's the whole point. So what I've done, like in 2024, here we are, October almost, and I think I've probably sent out 4 emails this entire year. So I don't even overwhelm folks in their inbox. Um, Interestingly though, because people are people, I have had some asked to be taken off the list, even if they only got 4 emails in a whole year. But that said, I don't overwhelm folks and I never advertise is I'm just trying to let folks know what's going on. And as we enter into 2025, there will be more of a focus on trying to figure out what people need and how to meet that need. That is probably, if you could distill my focus for the next year, that's it. What does our hyper local decentralized community need and how do we meet that need?
Well, y'all, if any of y'all are in East Texas, you absolutely have to check out Grumpy's Garden Club. I can vouch for it. It'll be a wonderful experience. It'll be very enjoyable, and it's going to be a resource. Because I think what Steve is trying to generate is community capital. I think that's what we're looking for, relationships. And really, I mean, like I said, this is how towns were formed. They were, you didn't have to like everybody in your town. It didn't work like that, but you, in essence, to be a community, you all need each other, you know, and we're going to need each other so much the more as we see the day approaching and as things get weirder and go sideways. And this has been a great conversation, Steve. I'll link Grumpy's Garden Club down below. I just want to remind everybody we are completely demonetized and this is value for value. So go on over to thetexasboys.com. Check us out over there. I want to welcome all of our new subscribers. And this is the Fearless Podcast. This is just another venue, way of giving people information and letting them know what's available to them. And if you're in the East Texas area, check out Grumpy's Garden Club. And I want to, hey, Steve, in closing, is there any one thing, is there a parting thought or an idea, maybe something that hasn't been stated?
Jesus Christ is King of the universe, and He has my full allegiance. So if you guys are worried about agendas, that would be it. I just want to serve Him with all the time I have left.
Well, that's a great way to end it. And I'll say this: stay fearless, my friends.